Welcome to Studio 58A live here at the Jamaica Information Service. I am your host, Vaughn Davis. Thank you to everyone tuning in wherever you are. Thank you so much for your eyes. We really do appreciate it. And like how we have your attention, do us a favor, man. Share this video with every single somebody in your contact list so we can have all the eyes on it, so we can have a very lively reception for our conversation. All right. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure you drop them below so we can keep the conversation going and get you the information that you need. All right. Now, good evening or good day wherever you are around the world, depending on what time of day it is. So good day to my fellow taxpayers, armchair economists, and conspiracy theorists. Today we tackle a burning question, and it is the government selling off state assets? The short answer, not quite. The long answer is not for me to give. That responsibility today falls on our guests, General Manager for Public-Private Partnerships and Privatization at the Development Bank of Jamaica Limited, Ms. Denise Arana. He's right over here. And along with her is Ms. Nicola Russell, Manager for Public-Private Partnerships and Privatization Services. Now, don't get me wrong, there have been a few curious decisions in the past that left the public with many questions. But before you grab your pitchfork and storm Garden House, let's actually look at the facts. So put down the protest banner, get comfortable, and let's unpack this economic issue with a pinch of sarcasm and a generous serving of truth. All right, now let's dive right in. Denise, to begin with you. Where the government has sold off the state assets, or what exactly is happening? Tell me exactly what's going on.
Well, first of all, Vaughn, thank you for giving us this opportunity. This is a question that keeps on coming at us all the time. I notice you never gave a definitive no.
No, it's not that is not my job. That is your job.
I'm here to give the definitive no. Okay. Because when you think of the word sell off, so sometimes it's sell off and sometimes it's sell out, right? And the fact of the matter is, when you think of those terminologies, you start to think of the government just has no plan. They're just doing it on an ad hoc, friend come, whatever, you know. And that's not the process. The DBJ, right? The DBJ is a central implementing agency for the government's program. Now, some people don't know that there is an actual program. That's why it can't be ad hoc, Vaughn.
Exactly.
Because there is a government policy. You can go and look on our website, www.dbankjm.com. There is a policy that governs privatizations and PPPs. There is what I would call a heavy, robust institutional structure and process that we have to go through to privatize an asset, right? And it takes quite a long time to privatize an asset. So it's not a quick ad hoc decision. So it starts with the government making a kind of high level decision. Like, I think that this asset would be, it's not a core asset for us. It could be a non-core asset. For example, a wind farm, could be an investment in roads. It could be a coffee farm. And then the government says, look, it would be probably better for the private sector to operate this asset, right? And so if we don't need it right now, and if we need cash and we have an asset, you know, Vaughn, let me just say, it's very much like if you are running your house and you need to put on
a new room or something like that.
Exactly. A new room, or fix up your bathroom, or fix up your kitchen. And you look and you say, I don't have the money right now, right? And so if you happen to have a third car that is there, you sell the car and then you use the money to invest in building out your home. So I don't, that's very simplistic, but I want to translate that principle into what the government does. There are certain assets that the government can monetize or cash in. They made the investment in Wigton, they made the investment in the road. Guess what? We need to cash in that investment, and we need to use that money to provide other really important public services for the government. So it's not an ad hoc process. So I've spoken about there's a policy. I've spoken about the principle that the government uses when they're thinking about privatizations. And I want to also say that there is an institutional framework. What does that mean? there is no one entity that's going to be involved in just privatizing the asset. There is cabinet. There is the Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation, because we report to the MEGJC. There is the Minister of Finance and the Public Service that weighs in on the fiscal side of it, like the money side of it. And there is the Public Investment Management Committee. And so that's for PPPs. That's a rigorous process that you have to go through, and everybody is vetting and double checking and, you know, giving you that what we call sometimes a gateway review. So we would look at the asset first and do some due diligence along with advisors, right? And then you say, okay, this asset, it can happen. There is interest in the private sector for it, but then you look on how you structure it. What are you going to tell the private sector to do? What does the government need to do? Is it an asset that you can't sell completely? Exactly. You might have to lease it. You do a PPP. So I guess the bottom line with what I'm saying,
it's
Vaughn,
way too difficult than people think to actually go try sell off. It is
exactly.
Not,
it's not. You can't do something like that and say it's a sell off kind of thing, right? It's a carefully thought out and monitored, some people would call adjudicated process that you have to go through, right?
Let me just stick a pin real quick. You see, before I even go any further, I guess I want to know from your perspective, from where you guys sit, why do you think that opinion persists? Why do you think it has just continued to be the perception that what don't people know that allows them to still have that kind of idea in their head?
It's not what they don't know, is what they know in their hearts.
Okay.
I can tell you that I have a family member that still, when they think of Air Jamaica,
exactly,
it is.
I'm glad you went there, because I was going to go there.
Yeah, man. Remember when we used to go on Air Jamaica and you got and it has become something that's embedded and really,
it's an emotional connection.
You said it perfectly. It's an emotional connection, right, to some of the assets. And so there are some assets that the government takes into consideration and they will never sell because of that emotional connection. But you have to think of the flip side. And if it releases value for the government to do other things. So what we need to do more and more is to explain that when you release that value, this is what it translates to you. This is how it translates to improving your life. This is how it translates to getting a road fixed, getting a new road. This is how it translates into more water for you that I can give NWC money to, fix. So I think maybe that's the connection. Like, people are missing that connection, that when you release the value, or when you bring in private investment, Jamaicans are supposed to benefit, and they do. But you just don't make that connection, right? You only know the part of, boy,
we're losing access to this particular asset that we've loved and thought we've associated with Jamaica. It's like it is equal to Jamaica. And I think Jamaica, you think Air Jamaica, you think, all the different things. And so that idea might persist. But let me bring you into the conversation now, Nicola. In terms of the actual objectives of the overall, I guess, I don't know if they're interchangeable with privatization or divestment, or how you approach one or two sides of the same coin or something like that. But explain to me, when you guys are looking at an asset and looking at this whole process, walk me through the process so I can understand it, so hopefully people watching can understand it as well.
Okay, so the government's decision to privatize an asset, it's basically stemming from even the owning ministry or agency looking at their plans and cabinet, and sometimes we even see something coming from the TIU indicating that this is where the government is going in terms of what they want to do in terms of the rationalization of the public sector, right? So it starts with a cabinet decision, really, the privatization. And DBJ would get involved in terms of assisting that ministry, department, or agency to do that privatization from the very beginning. So we'd form the enterprise team, which is a multi-stakeholder team. Usually it's around 7 persons, and it includes Ministry of Finance and Attorney General's Chambers, the owning agency. DBJ providing services. So we would start by looking at what the objectives of the transaction are. And then once you determine what that is, because if it is just to monetize the asset, or do they have some kind of development plan that they want to achieve with this transaction? So usually the objectives are made kind of clear at the beginning. Then we move into a situation where we're going to see what we need to do to move it to the next stage. Do we need to hire advisors? And usually we do, because there's valuations that need to be done, legal due diligence. So we get some technical experts here. We get the lawyers, we get financial advisors. Some transactions, like the more complex ones, the PPPs, public-private partnerships, we do a lot more assessments. So you need technical advisors, environmental, social assessments that need to be done. And nowadays we have climate assessment too, because it's a large infrastructure project. Now you're going to have to do the climate.
If I think about the long-term climatic effects and so on, yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's something we've actually worked into the policy recently, the PPP policy, how to do those climate assessments in the PPP development process. So once we've gotten those advisors on board and they've done their due diligence, which depending on the value of the transaction, because you see that a lot more assessments have to be done for those high value transactions. It could take months to do those assessments, but once it's completed, we have this business case, it's just basically a summary of all of the studies that have been done and the recommendations coming out of the assessment. Because what you find is there are things that need to be resolved. There are some strategic matters that the government will have to look back on and say, we need to focus on these areas in order for us to move forward. And all of that culminates in something that we call a business case, or transaction structure is for the privatizations where we're just selling something. And then we go back actually to cabinet. If it's a PPP, we go through the PIMS process, Public Investment Management System, and go to PIAB and PIMC, and then go to cabinet. But in either case, there's rigorous assessment for the PPPs. But for the divestments, we have to go back to cabinet and then get their approval before we actually implement what we recommend. So if we recommend selling shares, or we recommend selling the asset, breaking up the asset, selling this piece first before another piece, that's the structure. Because you could just sell something, a whole company or something, but it could be that you don't just sell the shares in the company. It could be that you just sell some of the shares. You don't have to sell all of the shares. You could have, the recommendation at the end of the day could be, we should retain 30% of the shares. That's a recommendation that we all have to agree on, and everybody, and then they think about it and they say, yes, we should retain a minority stake in this company. And then we move forward, and that's how we move forward, based on the approved recommended strategy. And that's how you see us going out to the market now. You see us saying, we want to get 70% of the shares sold in this company, or if they said they agreed with going with a stock exchange modality, you will see us going out now on the stock exchange with a prospectus and everything, with a broker. So we would have hired a stockbroker from the beginning, from the due diligence stage, and they would, the lawyers and everybody, and they would have prepared a prospectus. And that's when you see it going out to the market, when all of that has been done in the background.
That sound.
Yeah, all of that work has been done in the background. All of that work has been done in the background.
I had to just let you go through it, because it's important to emphasize the level of work and involvement, and once again to let people appreciate that it's not just like some one random person just say, so I go sell something there over there, so, and then the argument done.
Vaughn, does that really sound that like way. Random and ad hoc to you?
No, it's important to reinforce that there are several layers and several persons that get involved all throughout, at all different levels of society that help to make a thing happen. So the idea or the perception that it just a sell off is not accurate reflection of the level of rigor that goes into making some of these different transactions happen. And I think also personally to appreciate that when you guys think about the benefit, just reinforce for me, Denise, in terms of when you consider the benefit to the public and what they're going to get what are some of the considerations that you look at in terms of making sure that there is actual value for money, and beyond just necessarily just making sure the government see money, or the country's books look good, for argument's sake? There's consideration for members of the public and what they will actually benefit from and so on.
So I think, and I remember we keep on saying, I think that's the missing link, Vaughn. So what this mean for me?
Exactly.
Like, what am I getting out of it? So, first of all, when you look at divestments, which are straight like asset sales, and as Nicola said in the process, it's not just, I'm going to jump up and make that decision. It's, you look at what's the likely value that you're going to get. Can you run a competitive tender? Are people interested in it? So there is a rigorous process behind that. But the fact is that it will yield revenues for the government. And you know what that means? When you get revenues for the government, it means that the government can use it to provide public infrastructure that is more meaningful. Let's translate that to like a Wigton. Wigton was a wind farm company, right, that the government invested in for strategic reasons years ago. To show the private sector that, look here, it can happen, right? We can actually invest in renewable energy companies and it can make money. So when that purpose was achieved and the government said, okay, it's like recycling the investment. You know, like when people invest all the time in certain things. And so it's like recycling investment. I'm going to cash in that Wigton investment and I'm going to now release value, release cash so that the government can invest in other assets. Now, the government can use that to do several things, right? But I would want to start from the premise that the main conclusion that people need to take away from this program is basically like, and I'm going to use the words fiscal, but we can say financial. It is just a financial tool that the government uses to manage its resources in order to be able to deliver better services to the people of Jamaica and to improve the lives of Jamaicans, right? So I want to leave that as the big main kind of objective for the program. And so the government says, I have an asset here, I'm not using it right now, or the purpose has, my intention has been achieved. I'm going to monetize that and I'm going to take the money and I'm going to invest in roads. I can give education money for schools. I can help to fix up the hospitals. So that's one thing when you talk about like the revenues for government. Then, so that's infrastructure. Revenues can be used to do infrastructure. It can be used to pay down debt.
Well, of course,
right? To release value. But ultimately, we're thinking that what it does is the government uses that money to make a better life for you. So, and the assets that they are looking to monetize are ones, again, that I say,
probably not necessarily performing. Are you done with them?
Exactly. You're done with them. You said that. Okay. But I wanted to shift focus now to like PPPs because that doesn't involve in any way, shape or form a sale. And I need to be very
I want
clear.
to come to that.
Yeah, man.
Next,
so with PPPs, government can provide infrastructure by leveraging or using private sector's money, investment, using private sector's skill, right, and know-how, and their operational efficiency. They're more efficient at doing this than government. So rather than, like in the case of a Norman Manley or a KCT, where the government would have to put money directly into those assets to either renew them, fix them up, expand the runway, dredge, buy more equipment for the port, instead of the government using that money, Vaughn. You said to the private party, let's enter into an arrangement, and the arrangement governs 25 or 30 years. You're going to put the money in upfront to do this. You can collect from users at a reasonable rate, right?
Stick a pin right there, so but continue. That's the issue.
So you can collect from the users, and at the end of the day, it's still my asset, but I'm giving you the capacity. And you have to also pay me. Under those circumstances, you pay the government what's called concession fees, right, for use of the asset.
Right.
So look, it's a way of, let's go back to the original principle of managing your money, managing your assets, managing your resources to ensure that the people of Jamaica
get real value.
Get real value. That's
I think that's the one way where I think members of the public may have the maybe gross, if you want to use that word. But anyway, so okay, we know the government used to own this asset. Then we come one day and see a sign come up, a different man running it now, and he may charge a higher rate for argument's sake. And I think that is where persons come in and say, well, hold on. That's a lot of thing, because last week we used to pay $5, this week me I pay 10, and it's a different complete set of management and so on. And so the assumption is that okay, because naturally they're not necessarily on the ground floor in the area where the negotiation was done, and so they wouldn't necessarily see the value. And I think that's one of the things I want you to explain from the perspective of when these partnerships are arranged and sought, there is consideration given to the effect it will have on the public. So even though it may be that the persons may have pay a little extra, there, from your perspective, you have done the cost-benefit analysis to now be able to say we're sure that you will be getting improved service, better quality, different things that would have been considered before those kind of arrangements are done. So that's the thing I want you to elaborate on those considerations when you enter into these arrangements, because at the end of the day you have to make sure that value, the public receives value. So
right.
Both of you can kind of reinforce that for me.
So I would want to say, based on the process of due diligence, so there is a social impact assessment that needs to be done, and more often than not, I mean, there should be consultations to understand and to explain to people this is what is going to be delivered. If we're looking strictly at government used to own it before, now it's a man that charging me not $5 but 10. What I would want to focus on is what value are you getting for that 10. So is it that you're paying $5 and you're going there and you don't have the type of experience you have, or you don't have access to, let's say, whatever the public services or infrastructure or the quality of the service? And look, since we're just talking, let's look at the toll roads, right? So you're paying for what? A toll road that is well maintained, no potholes, so that the maintenance on your car should be less. Using the toll road means that you can get to work earlier. Some people might not want to get to work earlier, but I'm saying it can absolutely it can increase your productivity. So if I could say that, if people can look at what value is it bringing to you, and the terminology is value for money that you're spending, that should be the focus, right? But I also want to say it's not just, again, an ad hoc process that the private sector can come and just charge any money that they want, right? There are regulatory bodies that manage that concession agreement, and at 2 levels, right? Because it's called the grantor of that concession. Like in the case of the roads, it's NROC. In the case of the Norman Manley concession, it's AAJ. So in that agreement, you have certain things that the government says, because remember, it's a public-private partnership. I will do this, you will do this. And AAJ or NROC monitors that contract. But then you have external regulators as well. You have Civil Aviation Authority that looks on fees and charges and all of that and ensures that the public's interest is served, right? OUR is another regulator that serves that purpose. So again, how can that ever equate to a sell-off process, right, Vaughn? Because even there are so many parties that are involved in that entire process. And the ultimate thing is to ensure that the government can deliver what the people of Jamaica need, right? Increase access to these public services and public assets. So I'm hoping that helps to explain.
That should be hopefully one of the major takeaways from this conversation. And I want you also, Nicola, to talk about the due diligence that comes into, and once again ensure that the public's benefit is, you make sure you look after the public benefit and make sure that, because based on just the level of detail that you just explained in terms of all the different layers of involvement of the different stakeholders and so on. Talk to me about how you factor in that one as well to ensure that, you prevent unfair practices and make sure that everything is, on the up and up in a sense.
Well, I'll start with, we have a policy. So we have a privatization policy as well as the public-private partnership policy of the government. And that basically outlines, all of the government's intentions in terms of the objectives of the program and the whole idea of transparency and value for money. All of those things are in the policies. But essentially, when we're developing transactions, when you're doing that due diligence and you're trying to come up with the best structure or strategy, you are going to see the specific areas that you're going to need to possibly package in a way that the private sector can still be interested in something. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, if they're not interested in doing this transaction, then it's not going to go anywhere with them. The government may still choose to do the project because it has other benefits. So it may not be financially viable, but it has other economic and social benefits that are over and above any financial return that maybe a private sector is interested in. So the government may still choose to do the project because of those returns. So we have to think about it because the government is a different kind of partner. We have to look at all of the benefits to the wider society. Whereas, maybe the private sector is focused on specific areas.
Right.
So what we try to do when we partner with the private sector is to just ensure that they manage the risk that they can handle. So in a lot of times it's the financial risk, construction risk, maintenance, operations, those kinds of things. Yeah, man, you manage those things. And then they'll turn to us and go, well, if there's maybe a land matter, you own the land, can you deal with the land? So if you don't, if there's a squad, all of those things,
exactly.
You deal with it.
You deal with all
right. Well, and then they will deal with what they can deal with, which is construction, design, or financing. They're good,
to make sure that you get the final product.
Right. So we're coming together to do a project for the long term. So they're going to manage what they can manage well. But what we find with the PPP is the bundling of services helps with the efficiency. So if you have one consortium coming who is providing, you have bankers, the financing part, they have the contractors to do the construction, they have the design people, and they will be operating it and maintaining it over time. Then you find that they are bundling everything together and providing you with a proposal that should provide more efficient operations and services over the time. And then you're holding them to that because it's a performance-based contract. That's what the PPP is. And that's what is good about the PPP, because it's really a performance-based contract. But you have to hold them to it, which is why you have to have the contract management over the life of the concession.
That's
so
the point.
you preparing, we're preparing, that's what DBJ helps the MDAs to do all the assessments, to make the recommendations, to get to the point where they sign the agreement, and then it is the owning ministry, department or agency like NROC and Airports Authority and Port Authority, NWC, that have to monitor and manage the concession. So can you imagine? I think somebody gave us this analogy before, and I think it's quite appropriate that we're helping them to plan the wedding.
Okay.
But it is those entities that have to deal with the marriage. What is more important, the marriage or the wedding? Anyway, we're helping them to get the best wedding.
Get the best
partner. Best have the wedding.
Matchmaker.
We don't want you the
divorce, right?
Best. We're getting you the best partner that we know of, and we're gonna get you to that wedding. But you have the best partner. We gave you the best partner. is you have to make sure that marriage works over the 20, 30 years or whatever long you're married.
All right.
All right.
But if we're using that analogy,
I can't complain. It makes sense.
Look, everybody knows that every marriage isn't perfect.
That is true. Which,
right?
exactly.
So the whole point is that even in monitoring that contract, there are going to be things that there is no way.
That's where I was going to go next. It's like, okay, if we find that something is not necessarily happening in members of the public, it's something that nobody necessarily anticipated, but things just go in a particular direction and we don't necessarily see how this working out. And the public feel a little aware about how things are, unfolding and so on in the execution of this contract. What's the next step? You know what I mean? How do we remedy things? Because naturally you have to make sure the ultimate goal, I would imagine, is to make sure that we get value for money.
Absolutely.
So what's the next step?
The service level is at the point where, the public is satisfied.
Exactly.
So it has to be satisfactory. But so let's go back to when we are in the process and going through and finding that partner and structuring in a way that, is going to deliver value and all of that. There is no way, and I think people can appreciate that at the point that you're doing that and at the point you sign that contract for 25 years, you have no idea of all the things that can happen.
Yeah.
So we do this risk assessment, We do this risk assessment that says, and Nicola says, at the end of the day, he said, which are the risks that government are best, placed to handle and which risks. So you come up with this big kind of spreadsheet of what are all of these risks that could possibly happen. But even in doing that, there is no way you can predict or have knowledge of every single thing that can go wrong. And so during that contract management process, if it's being done correctly, and I'm confident that it is and will be, you pick up early warning signs of issues and you try to not let it escalate to the point where there has to be a dispute. But the fact of the matter is, in every single concession agreement, there is a provision that lays out how are we going to deal with any disputes that happen here? How are you going to? There is something called, Nicola said, it's a performance-based contract. In that contract, it lays out what you call key performance indicators, which means here are the service levels, here is the agreement, this is what you're going to produce, this is what you're going to deliver all the time, and then that is managed by the government entity, right? And so you use the contract as your Bible to say that, look, you monitor, this is what you're going to deliver. You are supposed to pick up any kind of early warning signs of trouble. If it escalates, then, but let's say an instance happens like COVID. There's no early warning sign with COVID,
There's
right?
no way you could have predicted
and so
that,
there are provisions that say if things like that happen, this is how we'll deal with it. So you think about at least that, how you remedy the situation, and it's actually in the contract. So going back to the point of contract management that Nicola raised as being key in the whole discussion.
You make sure that you can't, as best as possible, you make sure that the contracts try to mitigate all the potential pitfalls that could happen, and then we just take it from there, which makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Now, I suspect the biggest challenge people might have is I think you only really find people complain when things go bad. I think that's really the general situation. I think by and large, most of the work that you would do when everything is fine and the return on investment is good and the public is satisfied with the service given, I don't think you will hear too much complaining. You hear the familiar refrain, I will call it. Now, I guess one of the other questions people might want to have is I get that percentage, if you want to call it, but the rate at which we're able to do business with locals relative to persons. I suspect at the end of the day, you're trying to look for the best person to provide the service, or the best partner, the best fit, as you mentioned. But people might feel like, but only people from this particular place or this particular area, I get to contract them and so on. So how do you react or respond to questions that are, valid, those kind of questions, I suppose?
Who wants to take? You want to take that, Nick? Okay. So first of all, there's evaluation criteria that the government says, okay, this is the objective that we want to achieve. When we've done all the due diligence, we come up with what's called, and the government approves, everything about the transaction. And before we go to the market, there's something called a request for proposals. We're going out there to say, hey, we have this asset, we have this investment opportunity. Can you give us your best shot? Give us a bid. And there are evaluation criteria that the teams come together and decide, and they're weighted and scored and everything. But by and large, it is the best person
for the
qualifies for that criteria. So if you have experience running an airport, if you have experience running a port, and you have the dollars behind that, right? So it's not just experience. The evaluation criteria covers a wide range of things that the government is looking for in this best partner. And the fact of the matter is that when the bids come in, there is an independent team that does the evaluation. DBJ isn't even on that team, like anybody who prepares the transaction. We're not on that team. So there's an independent team that looks on the bid versus what we said we wanted. And then there is a judgment that is made and a score that ends up. And if they're the best party, then you're the best party, right? And so, but here's why I can say that confidently, and I'm
like when you're looking at the camera when you talk confidently.
Yeah, confidently. Right. I can say to everybody out there, when we look at the 40 transactions that we've done, over 85% of those transactions, would you like to finish the sentence?
No, I want you to finish the sentence.
It's Jamaicans.
It's very important that you said.
They're acquired by Jamaicans and Jamaican.
I'm glad you smell what I was cooking.
Yeah. So, right. And we'll have to sing that song over and over.
I think that is a message that needs to be proclaimed from the Taba Blue Mountain, so people understand that
Jamaicans,
it's not necessarily that we have the qualified persons with the expertise, with the intelligence, with the money, with the connections, with the technical skill to pull off a lot of what we want, and we can make it happen. So it's important to reinforce that message. That's why I was leading you down there, and you took it from me.
I took it. I took the bait and happily. Right. So the other thing is, when you look at some of the transactions that we have done, Nicola spoke to the stock exchange transactions. Right. Jamaicans.
Right.
Jamaicans investing in Jamaica.
I want you to talk about the tangible financial yields, because I know that we've done a lot and we've achieved a lot. I want you to take a little moment for this big up, talk for a little bit and big up yourself and talk about what you have actually tangibly achieved on behalf of the country.
Right.
Go right ahead.
In terms of revenues to the government, we have like over $520 million US that we've provided as revenues to the government from PPP and privatization transactions from 2009 to present. And then in terms of investments that the private sector have made in, whatever asset that they acquired or, PPP that they've done, we're looking at about US 1.25 billion. That's the investments that they've been making in these assets. So,
it's a big money move.
Yeah, we're looking at a lot of investment from the private sector and giving back money to the government to do other things.
And so, Denise said. What's the prognosis? How are things looking in the near future? I suppose. What's in the pipeline really from the DPJ?
Right. So we still have some stock exchange transactions that we're working on. So there's Jamaica Mortgage Bank privatization, and we're also looking at with Port Authority at their business process outsourcing assets to monetize that through the stock exchange. We have some PPPs in the pipeline. So there's the solid waste management PPP transaction, Soberry wastewater treatment plant expansion PPP, and we have some with the Ministry of Justice. They want to build some new courthouses via PPP modality in Mandeville, St. Anne, St. Catherine, and Trelawney. And then we have some privatizations. So we're currently doing the Greater Bernard Lodge sale of lands for residential and commercial. So some of those would have been completed already in terms of the sales. And there's, I think, some other development lots that they're looking at And we have some other companies like Nutrition Products Limited that the government had indicated they wanted to sell. So you can see that our portfolio is a mix of modalities.
Yeah, it's very diverse.
It's not just
Absolutely.
selling to one strategic investor. You will see that we're using other modalities. We're doing stock exchange to broaden the ownership base. So you will find, like for the TJH, you have thousands of people investing. So when we like report,
Let me
our
just call the
metrics-
number, Nicola. So
Yeah,
it was
sure.
24,000 applications that we got. And the important thing is that 14,000 new accounts were formed, right?
This is brand new people who, just
Never-
get new to the whole stock and
So it's real.
investing and all
It's
that.
real about broadening the ownership base. It's real.
Yeah,
And Wigton
and
had
that's starting to
11,000
new
new people.
Yes.
And so at the same time, there are two things that's happening here. Think about it. One, the government is getting money to do what it needs to do to provide services to the government, to the people of Jamaica.
Right.
But who is investing in them to do that? Same Jamaicans.
Mhm.
Get it? So you're investing in your own future, essentially,
Absolutely.
when you're doing that, and that's what we want to. So
And then
All right.
once
Value.
the private sector gets these assets, they're also making investments to make those assets better. So maybe
Correct.
the government, if they held on to those assets, perhaps they wouldn't be able to make that level of investment in order to make those assets what they are today.
All right,
So,
so people, as you can hear, there's a lot of opportunities in the pipeline. So let those who have ears to hear, this is the time, as Ms. Arana just said, 85% of them, of the opportunities end up in the hands of Jamaicans. So, well, if I think there's opportunities out there for you, if you're in the right mindset, if you have the right expertise, if you have what you need, I would say take the chance, bite the bullet. You never know. This could be an opportunity for you. You know what I'm saying? This is a great opportunity. No, I think I don't want necessarily this conversation to go too long. I just wanted to make sure we tackle the main question. So when I said out the country, there's a whole host of considerations that are going into this this whole discussion about privatization and divestment and different things, different approaches the government is making to basically improve the overall financial health of the country from a strategic perspective. So I guess I will give both of you the last word to just reinforce the work of the DBJ in this particular way and the benefit that members of the public are getting from it. So I'll start with you, Denise, and then Nicola, you can wrap up.
So if I would want to leave one message with the people of Jamaica about our program and the role of DBJ, is that DBJ manages this program that ultimately is supposed to deliver and has and will continue to deliver not just value to the people of Jamaica, but to improve the lives of Jamaicans. And I don't, Vaughn, you know my thing. There's no ordinary Jamaican. So when I hear people go, well, the ordinary Jamaican,
Right.
Jamaicans are extraordinary.
That's true.
So I'm saying that at the end of the day, we live and breathe and work at DBJ to ensure, right, that we can facilitate the government's efforts to deliver really good public service and public infrastructure. And ultimately, because even if you're delivering that, the end game is that the lives of Jamaicans are improved. And that's the bottom line for us.
All right.
So,
last word to you, Nicola.
Maybe we should have left the last word for Denise.
No.
Okay. I just want to reiterate
we work
that
hard.
Yes.
I think that's what you're
Yeah.
I mean, if you heard the entire process.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, if I
Nicola
work,
works hard. The entire team.
The entire team.
today,
So maybe
Right.
we should end with just thanking the entire team at DBJ that works on this, because it's a small team of 17. But we're working on multiple projects, and we're doing a lot of different things. Yes, there's transaction management, but we also do the capacity building. We try to get funding for the program, and we do monitoring too.
I think Nicola needs to be a little bit more hype as a person. And Nicola too calm. When I like that, you see,
Just
like
the
I said, I
balance.
tell
Just the
people.
balance.
No. Listen, I tell people all the time, that one of the things people tend to think of the public sector as a monolith. It's just one big government, But then there are a lot of dynamic individuals within the public sector itself who go to work every day to make sure that they do right by the people of Jamaica, to make sure that they give the best service and the best value. I say we have two of them here. I say I have a whole heap of work. Nicola do when she got work every day. So whenever I see her,
Hello, excuse me, Vaughn. I don't want to.
I just said sit you out with her. So whenever I see Nicola in the supermarket buy her juice, whenever I see Denise, just pat her from the back and say good job. I like the work one another and just try to appreciate. That's one of the things I always preach. Make sure we understand. Don't run with a narrative when you only have a small piece of the information. All right. That's why we had them here today, to make sure that we reinforce the importance of understanding that there's much more to this story. All right, and they've explained themselves and they've let us know that there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes. We not just sell off the country, please. Let's see if we can make that one the die a natural death. All right.
And thanks for the opportunity, Vaughn. Thanks
no
for
problem.
being able to giving us the opportunity to tell the story, the real story. So we do appreciate it too.
That is what we are here for. All right. With that said, I think it's time for us to wrap. Thank you so much to anyone who tuned into our discussion. We thank you so much for your attention. We really do appreciate it. And if you have a question, drop it in the comments. We can go through afterwards and put you in touch with these important people over here so they can hopefully answer the questions that you have and we can get some better understanding. All right. Remember that our audience plays a major part in our show. So if there's anyone in particular you'd like us to have in studio, let us know. We'll try to have that person in studio as soon as possible, answering the questions that you want answered. All right. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. We're there, Jamaica Information Service. While they're actually, you can check out Development Bank of Jamaica as well. I'm sure they're all over the internet. I don't know when they find the time because I whole heap of work them I do over there. But, I'm sure you can check them out as well. Learn more about what's happening. A lot of these organizations and entities that are there doing a tremendous amount of work. Take the time to get to know them, get to know the people behind them and the work that they're doing. And I'm sure you have a greater appreciation of the value that they bring to our society each and every day. All right? We do this very often on our online platforms. I've been your host, Vaughn Davis. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please have a wonderful, wonderful